All right, welcome back. I'm going to try this again, see how that works, see if you guys actually pick up on this, and welcome back to Hot Shots episode 5. Again, the usual disclaimers. It's for adults, it's a one take, it's not edited. There will be some swearing. There usually is when you talk to me. And yeah, another disclaimer, I'm super fucking tired. I'm exhausted. I mentioned this in an email, I think today or maybe yesterday, that I've been working on stuff that doesn't involve Black Lodge, just shit that pays the bills, and it's been gnarly. So if I look a little haggard or if my voice is a little fucked up, it's because I've been in Zoom meetings pretty much nonstop for a good 2 weeks. So yeah, bear with me. But I hope I can pull this one off again. I'll try and keep it kind of brief today because I got shit to do and you all got shit to do, and that's how that is. So the thing that I wanted to talk about today, and it's a singular topic today, despite there being a shitload of stuff that we can talk about, we're going to be talking about Spotify. We're not necessarily going to be talking about Neil Young or Joe Rogan because, right? Well, actually, let's say it. Fuck that guy. And but I think there is not only a necessity for a larger discussion in regards to tech, art, ownership, and how we can and are dealing with it as consumers and as people, and then just looking at it from a different angle, maybe looking at it from a different perspective. All right, just to recap. Neil Young and a few other sort of relatively large musicians, or musicians of stature, threatened and have pulled their catalogs from Spotify because they feel they don't want to have their art and their work on a platform that promotes, for a lack of a better word, fucking fake news. Maybe that's the right word. I'm not entirely sure, but people who use their platform to talk shit. Right? Fair enough. All good. Totally with you on that one. Again, I'm not going to get into my feelings about a certain Mr. Rogan or the things that he does, because quite frankly, I've never listened to any of his stuff, and I don't intend to. I've had plenty of fucking idiot bros in high school that, aside from beating me up when I was a little kid, I never particularly liked anyway. So whatever. So there's no need to talk about this. What I would like to talk about, and I think it's kind of taking place in let's call it the general discussion about things, but it's let's talk about ownership, right? Let's talk about the role we allow companies like Spotify, and this applies to companies like Facebook, right? Meta, Instagram, Twitter, Amazon, all of that, the tech industry that shapes our narrative. Let's talk about them, their role, artists, art, ownership, and the bullshit that ensues, right? Now, total disclaimer, as you all know, I use Spotify. I remember the reason why I got into Spotify is I think about 6 or 7 years ago, I started working for a company called Sonos, right? The wireless speakers company. And up until that point, the way I listened to music was through vinyl. Really simple. I got a few CDs, but mostly it was vinyl. That was that. And I was really skeptical about digital music. Not because I was aware of how badly they pay their artists, but I just wasn't, I'm relatively technophobic. I just, vinyls I can touch, I put on, that works, this and the other. But, you get to a certain point in your life where your entire fucking house, when you enjoy music as much as I do, is just a big vinyl library, and it becomes totally unfeasible, and it gets a little out of control. Now, coming back, I started working at Sonos, and they're like, hey, if you want to use these speakers, you got to use your digital music libraries, right? And I was like, what the fuck is that? And they're like, well, you got to use Spotify or Apple Music, which I think didn't even exist at the time. Things like Mixcloud, which I was using for, recording live mixes I was doing in bars and clubs and this and the other. And that, I was like, oh, okay, cool, figured it out. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the ease of accessing these huge fucking libraries of music and art and this, that, and the other, and have them play without taking up much space. I think the majority of us live in relatively big cities, and space is a commodity that is, expensive. I can't afford to live in a big space, and I doubt most other people can either. So that all made sense. At the time, I was also doing a lot of artwork for bands. As you know, I'm friends with a few larger musical acts, this, that, and the other. And, obviously the discussion came up. And, I think behind closed doors, every musician that I knew and every band that I knew were just like, what the fuck? Like, this is not good. Like, we don't get paid enough for this shit. And truthfully, totally admit this to myself. At the time, I really wasn't giving it too much thought. I saw more benefits for myself and didn't think about the work these artists, even the artists that I was friends with, were putting into and seeing what they were getting coming back. And I think at the beginning of my experience with Spotify, that to my own fault, that I wasn't making that connection, which is fucked. But and this kind of ties in not just to Spotify in itself, but like in a larger picture, this ties into the experience that we have with a lot of the tech that comes out. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of this bullshit. Like, you get offered seemingly so much for so very little. Now, the discussion about, the product is free, you're the product, it's been going on for a long time, and this does, amazingly, this does actually apply to Spotify specifically as well. But we'll get to that in a minute. And that's, I think that's the angle I want to take this in today. So again, like, coming back to the facts, right? So Neil Young goes, hey, you guys, Spotify pays Joe Rogan, I don't know what the fuck it was, like an absurd amount of money, like 100 million, 200 million, I don't know what the fuck it was. Money I can't imagine ever even knowing what that means. To host his podcast. Now, his podcast is bullshit. There's no way to mince it. It's nonsense. It's just a bunch of fucking stoner bros talking bullshit. And the problem with that is, though, of course, he reaches a shitload of people. He has a huge amount of influence. Now, again, this is the same discussion that's been going on for like a decade in terms of all of Web 2.0, like, user-generated content. Who is responsible here? Is it the publishing company, which technically they are, or not even publishing, I think they're just distribution companies, or is it the artist / person making the content when it comes to providing or issuing content that is harmful, wrong, fake, and influences and destabilizes a civic society? I find that discussion hugely interesting because it opens up the door to the discussion of free speech, responsibility. What does our society want? What do we seem acceptable, and what not? It's this massive philosophical framework which hasn't been in the public discourse for a good 60, 70, maybe like 100 years. Like, just because we've left it, because nobody wants to fucking talk about these hard questions. Nobody has, and this is where it gets really gnarly. If we look at the curriculums in schools in Western Europe and, in Europe and in Northern America over the last 60, 70 years, courses that teach you critical thinking, courses that teach you not just critical thinking, but allows you to look at situations and then discuss it from so many different viewpoints, they haven't been supported, they haven't been funded, they haven't been taught, not just for like 20 or 30 years, but we're talking, since the fucking 60s. Like, we're talking three generations. Have been purposely left out of learning the ability to critical assess information. Like, how do we get information? How do we talk about information? What does that all mean? And then, more importantly, not only do we lack a populace that is able to do so, we have governing bodies, be it our governments, or even worse, the industry that determines our governments, that doesn't want that discussion to take place. So we get to this point where we're at now, where you have brand companies, distribution companies, media companies, Meta, Twitter, Spotify, certainly Amazon, Google, who have such vast power when it comes to distributing knowledge or information, rather, without any accountability. And this is where that discussion really starts becoming interesting. Like, where do we apply accountability, and to who, and what for, and with what purpose, and with what end result? And this is at the heart of this discussion as well. It's not about fucking Joe Rogan. It's not about Neil Young. Joe Rogan is irrelevant. Neil Young, quite frankly, is also kind of irrelevant, and he made himself even more irrelevant what was it, like 3 days ago, like he went on Twitter again saying, hey, this, so sorry, there's a little break. My fucking screen went dark and I pushed the wrong button. See, this is what I mean about me being a technophobe. I pushed the wrong button. So the recording stopped. Now I have to start a second one. Let's see if I can mix these together. And sorry, that was my phone. And see if I can tie them together. Anyway, so Neil Young went on Twitter and he, said, hey, fuck Spotify, but you can stream my shit on Amazon. Like, what the fuck, dude? Like, they're just as bad, if not worse, than Spotify. And so that's why these two people are so totally and utterly irrelevant when it comes to this discussion. I'm really happy that we're having this discussion because what it comes down to is, again, it comes down to fucking ownership. Like, who owns what and who gets what for what they do, right? So, again, breaking it down, and again, I'm not an industry insider when it comes to the music industry. I know a few people who work at labels. I've spoken to them about this stuff. Nobody wants to go on record, of course, because jobs are involved, and all of this shit and this, that, and the other. But let's figure this one out, right? So, artist makes money, goes to a record company, they give them cash to record, use their infrastructure, they put it out, distributed it to a company like Spotify. Spotify says, cool, you got 1 million streams and pays the artist 0.003 cent per stream. That means at 1 million streams, the band gets $3,000. Technically, no, the record label gets the money because the record label owns the rights and the publishing rights for the thing. Spotify keeps X, Y, Z, and the artist kind of gets nothing. It's pretty much how that works. I'm sure there's other examples and there's other arguments in that strain, but fact of the matter remains, in the current deal that we have, and it doesn't matter if it's fucking Spotify, Tidal, or any other, they all work on the same subscription model. The artist is the one that gets shafted. It's just how it is. It sucks. It's not right because the artist is the one that produces. Now, of course, in a ideal free world, you'd have a record company providing the infrastructure for an artist to produce a record. Studios, engineers, support staff, fucking cocaine budgets. That's a thing. And so on and so on and so on. And then you have a distribution company that plays the music, right? So we're not talking about the fucking 90s anymore. We're not talking about malls and CDs. We're talking about the streaming services because that shit's not going to go away. If anything, that's going to get just, it's going to grow. Now, why is it, and the question is then why is it that the record company makes a fuck ton of cash, the distribution company makes a fuck ton of cash? Yes, they have costs, infrastructure costs, person, internet, bandwidth, all of this crap, but the person that makes the art doesn't. Again, this, it's all, the question is like, who owns what? And it's mind-boggling, but it's an important discussion to be having because we're at that point, right? And if you want to add an extra metaphysical layer to it, let's start a conversation in our societies, because that's our job, about how we value art. We haven't done that. We've been exposed to art in modern times, post-Second World War, permanently, right? People like myself, musicians, writers, journalists, painters, sculptors, whatever. Like, we produce because that's what we fucking do. Whether or not we get paid for it is a whole different ballgame, but that's just what we do. Now, for some reason, we're so inundated and we're so used to having access to all of this, but don't want to pay for it. That's a discussion I think is bigger than what I can probably do by myself here, and maybe that's something I'll pick up with someone else over the next couple of weeks, but I think that's where we can start, right? Do we want art? Do we need art as a society? And if so, yes, what is it worth? Let's figure that one out first, and then we can take the discussion from there. And that's something I'll touch on towards the end of this as well, because I think I have a few solutions for this predicament, let's call it that way. But obviously I'm not without fault, so I'm kind of just making it up as we go along. Coming back to the whole setup between Spotify and Amazon Music and Tidal to a certain degree, and everybody else, artists and record labels, and people just get shafted, all this, that, and the other. There is obviously like this massive long history of artists getting fucked by the industry. And that's not me even touching upon the racist history of just specifically music, especially in Europe and in the United States. And there's a long fucking history of that. I mean, let's face it, 95% of all music that we enjoy comes from a black minority, and they've never gotten paid anything. And that's again another subject we can probably touch upon at some later point. But that's that. The entire industry of art, the industry of music, is based on exploitation. It's based on abuse, and it's based on the artist getting as little as humanly fucking possible. Yes, there are rich musicians, of course. Very few, but there are. No questions asked. But that all ties into the weird American, dream concept. Hey, if you can make it if you work really hard. No, you can't. Total bullshit. You can't do that. It doesn't work. And it all comes down to connections. It comes down to what in part of the industry wants you to succeed and what doesn't. And I've made the reason why I keep looking down here is because I've made some notes, which I kind of even haven't touched upon half of these, but I'm sort of looking at the timing and going, it's a big fucking subject. So let's not, I'm sort of floating with the ideas here, and I think maybe it's time to talk about solutions, right? I mean, that's a vibe. Rather than fucking reacting to some sort of bullshit that goes on and does take our mind off things. And let's talk about solutions. Like, what can we do, right? Like, what can you and I do? And what can we as a group, not just in terms of Black Louders, but like everybody. What are the options? Now, one option is obviously to cancel your subscription to Spotify and all of that, and figure out a place where you can access art that you enjoy and would like, and figure out where the artist gets a fair share. I don't think there are many places out there. Sure, you can buy vinyl, and even then the artist doesn't get even a close enough cut as that they deserve. But it's an option, but it's obviously, there's the issue with space, technology, expense, and this and the other. Another thought I had is that there's no fucking way ever where we can have a subscription-based streaming model that pays out fairly. I pay, what is it, like $10, well, €10 a month for my Spotify account, and it's like, dude, how is that even possible? Like, the numbers don't add up. But that's a different thing. So I think, obviously you can cancel your subscription. I'm not going to judge you if you don't, but that's if you're really involved in the subject like I am canceling my subscription. I'm moving all my shit somewhere else. Cancel that. That's one way. It's one of those wonderful, weird moments where, despite us not existing in a free market, as the capitalists like to say, that's a free market decision you as a consumer can exercise, which is cool, and that'll hurt the bastards, and that'll probably make them rethink it. But that doesn't change the problem at heart. It literally doesn't. It's a cause and effect kind of thing. It's very minuscule and very reactionary. Now, I think, a potential, this is just like an idea that I came across a little while ago, and I think a few other people have been thinking about, and I think it's worth just throwing it into the pot for other people to marinate on and talk about, and this, that, and the other. It's like we have the infrastructure, right? And we've already had this for a long time, where we as a society collect information and collect art and offer it for a relatively cheap price that's heavily subsidized by taxes, and they're called libraries. Right? Libraries exist, and they're a fucking wonderful thing. Like, I'd be nowhere without libraries. It's not like I have cash to buy billions of books and this, that, and the other, or access information. But libraries. But imagine a library for art, or like a digital library for music, right? Same concept. Like, it's stored, it's tax funded, and as much as I fucking hate paying taxes because they go to subsiding wars that I don't agree with. In an ideal world, let's talk about a fucking scientific utopian system right here, right? Like, okay, so it's have a space, a digital library where all art, anybody can upload their art, anybody can access the art, provided that you are, you pay a fee, like be it part of your taxes even. And once we have that in place, we have a discussion about what we think is a fair system. Like, I don't think we need the record companies per se, right? Like these massive privately owned institutions that fuck everybody over just for profit. They exploit art and artists. We don't need that. We can just kind of cut out the middleman. And even when it comes to like streaming and distribution of art, as like something like Spotify does, like that infrastructure to make that happen, that exists already. We pay for it with our taxes. I mean, like, the internet infrastructure is something the taxes paid. not some private company. So we can just technically cut out all of that bullshit. We just need to make it happen. I quite like the idea. Like, obviously, I think it'll take a huge discussion about what we as a society consider value for art. I think that concept in itself is interesting to even debate. Like, do we value art? What is the value of art? Who gets to decide what the value of art is? And so forth and so on. But I don't think we've ever had that discussion in our civilization. And I think that's really fascinating. I think we should have that. And that's a suggestion. It's keep thinking, and I think that all ties into this huge, again, construct within philosophy that where we say that reality is nothing but a social construct, upheld through force by things like the police and this and the other. Yeah, that's true, and these changes only take place once we start talking about them, and that's what I'm hoping to do with this one here. We can talk about it. I think we should. I think the current reality of how we access and pay and support the arts is dismal. It's exploitative. It's fucking shite, quite frankly, and that needs changing. So thank you to Neil Young to bring that up, and everybody else has jumped on board. But that's now up to us to carry forward. Like, we cannot expect corporations to change just because we caused a Twitter shitstorm. Like, that just doesn't exist. That does not happen, and it will not happen. We cannot put the responsibility of that level of change on any individual shoulder. It's not going to work, and it will not work, and it's not fair. Thirdly, we need to talk, and then, on top of that, not just in terms of how we value art, but also responsibilities, because, that's part of all of this, the fucking discussion. That's another discussion we had, and I think that's where we need to kick off this thing, and I consider that an invitation. Think about that. Think about what art means to you, what the value is, how it should be accessed and by whom, and how we can cut out the middlemen. Let's try that. Anyway, I hope this works. I hope this whole thing, cutting the two videos together, works. We'll see. I'm going to go have a cigarette and a cup of tea, and then write the newsletter for tomorrow, and I shall see you then. Oh, and by the way, t-shirts coming out. You should buy that. I think that'd be really cool, because, art and value and all this and the other. Smooches. Thanks for listening. See you next week.